My mother told me this story. It was about 1958, and we didn't live very rich then. I wasn't even alive then, but my older brother and sister were. Our grandfather, my mom's dad, bought them a very small house, you could say, a dugout, just 2 small rooms, clay floors, well, and all that. So, my dad went on a business trip, my mom was doing housework after work, my brother and sister were already asleep, it was very late, and my mom said that she remembered well that she had closed the door on the hook. So, she was doing her chores and felt that someone was looking at her. She turned around and there was a man in a coat, although it was summer outside. She says that she was very frightened, but did not show it, as the children were sleeping in the room, but only asked, "How did you get here?" He did not answer her anything, but walked into the room, looked at it, shook his head. The mom stood there like a stumbling block, couldn't even move. The man looked at her, smiled and left. Mom stood there for about a minute, then looked at the door, and it was locked from the inside with a hook. She ran outside and sat by the porch the rest of the night. In the morning she gathered her brother and sister and went to her parents and told them what had happened. My grandmother said that soon there would be changes, there would be a new house. And that's right, a month later my parents were allocated a plot of land, and they began to build a house. That's the story. My name is Vlad. I live with my parents and my younger sister in an old 5-story building on the 2nd floor. After the birth of Sophia, my sister, we decided to sell our old apartment and buy a new one, but we had maternity capital to the money from the old apartment. I was looking for an apartment because my parents worked hard to provide for the family. After a few days of searching, I got one good apartment, which was on the 2nd floor of a 5-story building. But unlike our apartment, it was a new building. Having shown the ad to my parents, the general council decided to call and agree on what day we could see the apartment. My father called the number given in the ad. He was introduced to a nice, judging by the voice, girl, who explained that now is on the road, and if we want to see the apartment, we need to go to her neighbor on the floor, who lives across the street. My father agreed that we would come this Sunday, closer to 12 noon, and asked the girl to warn the neighbor about our visit. Vika, as this girl introduced herself, said that her neighbor Aunt Tanya would be waiting for us that day. Finally Sunday came, we got up in the morning, had breakfast and gathered my sister, and went to see the apartment. To make it clearer, this apartment was perfect for us in terms of price. It was asked for exactly the amount that we would have from the sale of the old apartment and maternity capital. The apartment itself was in excellent condition, which was surprising for its low price. Having arrived at the address, we saw a fairly new 5-story building. There were no cars in the yard, as Vika, the owner of the apartment, said. Here live mostly pensioners, they have no cars, only sometimes relatives come to visit them. Having gone up to the 2nd floor and ringing the doorbell of Vika's neighbor, we were opened by a nice old lady, who without giving a word to say in a quiet voice asked, "Are you the new tenants of my neighbor? Here are the keys. As soon as you finish the inspection of the apartment, put the keys in my mailbox, I'll take them later," and immediately closed the door in front of us. It seemed strange to me, her quiet and sweet voice sounded too naive, her face was too unnaturally kind. But deciding to put it down to her advanced age, I put these thoughts out of my mind. I would like to specify that there were no lights on the floor, and the window, from which light could seep in, was taped up with several thick layers of newspaper. It was the middle of summer now. What was the point of taping the window completely shut in the first place? While I was thinking about it, my parents opened the door and entered the apartment. I followed them and closed the door behind me. Out of habit, the apartment was pitch black. The light switch didn't work and there was no light in the hallway. Then my parents walked forward, went into the kitchen, as we would find out in a couple of seconds, and turned on the light there. A bright beam of light bulb illuminated the kitchen, part of the hallway. Everything really looked like in the photo, new renovation, new furniture, only apparently something wrong with the wiring, or the bulb burned out. When entering the apartment, we immediately saw a straight corridor in front of us. The kitchen was on the right side, almost at the very end of the corridor. There was another room in front of it, but the door to it was closed. On the left side was a separate shower room, a restroom, and a pantry. Opposite the front door, at the end of the hallway, was a hall. My parents were in the kitchen looking around. I felt uncomfortable in this one. The whole apartment looked so well maintained, although Vika said that no one had lived there for a long time. My sister suddenly shouted, "Look," and ran forward along the dark corridor, running into the hall. There was not a single ray of light in the hall. It was pitch black. Not knowing what to do, I followed my sister, but I was stopped by a sound. But wait, It wasn't a sound, it was a child's voice, my little sister's voice. It was coming from the bathroom. But how could that be? I saw with my own eyes as she ran into the hall. I go into the bathroom. There was no one there. A sink, a shower stall, a bathtub, and a voice, my sister's quiet voice whispering, "Help me." I start fidgeting around looking for where the sound is coming from. Finally I could make out that it was coming from underneath the bathtub, which was standing on some sort of high stand. I looked under it. There was a child sitting in a dark corner, but it wasn't my sister. It was a 2-year-old baby boy. I picked him up and walked out into the hallway. Vika never said a word about children. He couldn't have gotten here, the door was closed, and that grandmother never said a word about it, though maybe she forgot to tell us that her grandson was here. Why is he here alone, though? While I was thinking about it, I heard a chuckle in my head. I didn't realize where the sound was coming from, but it was near, then another, and another. I held the baby so that his head was next to mine. I bring the baby away from my chest. Oh my God. Another laugh came from this baby, but his mouth wouldn't open. He was laughing with his mouth closed, and then he opened his mouth. I saw strange teeth that were pointed in some places. His eyes glittered in the darkness that was illuminated by the dim light from the kitchen. The creature asked in a rough, not at all childlike voice, "Have you come to feed me?" It turned its head to the side and bared its sharp teeth in a terrible smile. I started to panic, standing still, but I realized that I had to do something. The creature was not taking any action yet. I decided to take a chance, quickly flew into the bathroom, put the baby there, and jumped out as fast as I could, closing the door behind me. Only 2 thoughts were going through my head. I had to get my sister and parents and get out of here. Turning on the flashlight on my phone, I ran towards the hall to get my sister. Running past the kitchen, I shouted to my parents, "Let's get out of here." They were standing and looking at something in the window. I ran into the hall, lighting up the room with a flashlight. I saw my sister. She was standing there looking at a painting hanging on the wall that depicted some deity. He had the same glint in his eyes and fangs as the child I found. Taking my sister in my arms, I ran to the kitchen. When I got there, my parents were still standing there looking out the window. I shouted at them, saying, "Let's get out of here, quick." But they didn't react. Then I walked closer to them. God, they had no pupils, the weight of their eyes were completely white, covered in some kind of film. I jerked back and looked at my sister. Instead of my sister, in her clothes was the child I had found in the bathroom. I threw the creature on the floor and rushed out of the apartment. I was about to run outside, but I rang the doorbell of the old woman who had given us the keys. Maybe she would know what was going on. She opened the door and again, without saying a word, asked, "Have you come to feed me?" I flinched back and slammed the door in the old woman's face. When I turned back, I almost fainted. My parents, they stood in front of me and looked at me with their empty eyes. In their arms was the creature in the body of a child. They all started saying in one voice, "Have you come to feed us?" I don't remember how I managed to escape, how I ran out into the entrance and found myself already on the street, where there were many people. I couldn't catch my breath, my heart was beating wildly. I stood bent over, holding my heart. When I got up, I saw that all the passers-by were looking at me. They had no pupils, their empty eyes were looking in my direction, their mouths were open, and everywhere there was a chorus of voices that said only one thing, only one question: "Have you come to feed us?" I woke up, covered in sweat, my heart was pounding hard. Geez, it was just a dream, just a bad dream. Only we were really supposed to look at this apartment today. Okay, it was just a dream, nothing more. We arrived at the address. Dad said the landlady wasn't coming and handed the keys to her neighbor. He asked me to take the keys while they changed my sister, who got motion sickness on the road. I went up to the 2nd floor, rang the doorbell whose number my father had told me. An old lady opened the door, her head turned on its side. She smiled sweetly with her sharp teeth and asked, "Come to feed me?" That question rumbled in my head. I turned around. My parents were standing there, looking at me with empty eyes and repeating the same question: "Have you come to feed us?"